Hi, my name is Bridget Vixnans, and I'm speaking with Joseph Saine today, who teaches the first year and now the second year of Alchemical Alignment. I'm wondering, Joseph, what is alchemical alignment? If a prospective student were to ask you, how would you answer that question?
Mm. Yeah, I think I've answered it probably 100 ways. And in general, for me, it feels like a very rare portal that opens different realities of coherence and both deeply personal and individual alignment with who I am and who each person is in a sort of pluralistic context, meaning there can be many different ways that coexist, and there can be activation or danger in the field um, without causing harm, and there can be intensity without overwhelming. Um, and the way that the tides move through the shared space. So the tides being the way that anything in the universe breathes in and out. And so a kind of deeper, slower, rhythmic unfolding starts to feel more and more natural in these spaces because of the conditions that we practice co-creating together.
So, to be specific and kind of logical, you're
Yeah.
talking about a trauma resolution training program for practitioners.
Hmm.
And the beautiful vocabulary you were just using describes how many different people come and each one could be served all at the same time by similar theory and practices, but actually they can be so different one from another.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing that I think I'm always in awe of when I'm sitting in this role of holding the space of facilitator or teacher, and also when I've been student or assistant, is how much can coexist in one container. Because there is a sense of containment that is clear, and there are, pieces of theory that we meet, pieces of practice that we meet, and spaciousness for people to follow their own intelligence and their own needs throughout the day. But even within that, there's so much room for variety and the living presence of intelligence that exists in each person's process. And what I love is the weaving of each time that we gather is so different, but also um, there's something very clear. There's a signature to what it is that we're doing together. And it does feel both it's sort of an interesting paradox of remembering something that feels really old to me. Kind of like the first time I took year one, I think I said something like, this feels like human 101. And then I think later it also felt like, oh, we're meeting thresholds and kind of uh, orienting to new realities that feel perhaps unfamiliar in a certain way, but also like coming home in a strange, interesting paradox. And the funny thing about it is that there's not really a way in which it's the same story I think people might find commonly, which is if you assimilate with this, then you will belong or something like that. It's kind of more like, wow, we're all so different. And that's actually part of the beauty of nature. And there's a way that we can still co-create together. And there's a way that we can still exist, but it begins with having a self that matters.
And on the way there, safety and danger are taken into account every step along the way.
Hmm.
There are
Yeah.
some healing programs that are love and light and focus and clarity, and metaphysical programs that say just stay on this path, this path, this path. And what often tends to be the case is that in the shadow remains danger. Does that sound true to you?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think part of the essential quality of including threat and danger in these classes and in these ways that we practice is indispensable. I guess I would say there's no way to bypass that which is an expression of intelligence and the recognition that there are things that are dangerous in the world and in the spaces that we share relationally. And so I think it's really a relief for many people to sit in a space where there's not necessarily an overemphasis of danger, but also not an underemphasis. And there's this sense of, oh, wow, danger can also breathe. And
Yeah,
there are tides that move through the threat responses that are incomplete, or even what would it be like to have a complete threat response?
right. And so somatic, I'm thinking there's so many people that I speak with whom I speak who say, well, what do you do? And I say, oh, I work with somatic trauma resolution when the body is holding a trauma. Post traumatic physiology is the landscape that we with which we work. And everybody by now has heard of psychotherapy and mental realm therapies. They haven't necessarily heard of body realm therapies. How do you even start to have a body in the first year? If somebody were a practitioner of mental health therapies or spiritual health therapies and they were coming to have a body, it seems for some people actually impossible.
Mhm.
Like, I'm supposed to have a body, I can't have a body.
Yeah.
What do you do with that?
Yeah. So right away we come into the very advanced part of our work, which is oftentimes right there at the beginning in our world today, which is that there are double binds or very tightly wound, stuck experiences that are saying, I must, but I can't. And that too is an expression of intelligence. And so we're always seeking where's the location in time and space where something is speaking from, um, to try to get to know that one better, that voice or that experience better. And the inclusion and also um, kind of unfolding of what is really happening here, what wants to happen, what is living in the conundrum brings um, unimaginable depth, I think, because the reality that one person may be used to, um, when that's been always true, that I have to, but I can't.
Yeah.
Um,
Similarly, we recently had an applicant who said every program I turn to immediately moves toward false intimacy with another human being. I can't stand that idea and I can't stand people.
yeah.
Is that not common? And so, how is a practitioner to join this type of trauma resolution training program where there's something about the relational field going on, but oh my goodness, does that mean I have to suddenly be accompanied by people?
Yeah. No, exactly. And I think that that's a big part of what happens for many people in our programs is starting with no is a really big part of what we encourage and teach and part of our principles. And that sense of really stepping back and stepping back and stepping back until there's right distance. Um, the what if we stopped doing I have to as the center of relational work?
That might be new. Obligation being at the foundation of so much that we're up to.
Right. Yeah.
Litigation, productivity, extraction, exploitation, and the treating of self like I just have to do these things in order to
Right.
survive. Yeah.
Right. And also there can be the sense of, well, if I don't have, I have to, or if I don't follow the I have to, what would happen? Would nothing happen? Would I just cease to exist? There can be even a kind of existential identity there around this is who I am.
Or dropping somebody into the five depths of freeze. By now, if you're listening to this, welcome, welcome, welcome. And you may have heard that we work with five depths of freeze depending on how intense or possibly how early difficulty was for the nervous system. There was no chance to escape, there was no chance to fight. And so freeze was the only thing that a person could do in order to manage the situation. Sometimes this is our own freeze, and sometimes this is an ancestral pattern of freezing and then presenting as if you're here and participating, or freezing and checking out completely. There are many different ways that freeze can show up, and that's part of what we include in the program.
Yeah. So sometimes before I have to is more nothing, or I don't know, or I can't, or something like that. And then the recognition of I have to comes after some thawing. But that sense of there being a way of survival of something, whether it's in your own life developmental story, it could be in your ancestral streams and the stories of the people that came before you. Um, but that quality of survival is also deeply intelligent. And so, how do we meet the depths of that kind of intelligence?
Do you want to say anything about the people you've seen coming through the program, or maybe some part of yourself, how the
Yeah.
program affects people?
Yeah. I think there's a whole wide range of who seems to be drawn toward this work. And it changes over time. I think most of the people are asking really deep questions. I think maybe everybody is. I could perhaps imagine that everyone that I've talked to is asking really deep questions about the world and who they are in the world and what could matter in a world that has um, so much going on in it. So there's a lot of world work, I think, that ends up happening, but it comes, especially in the first year and even more emphasized in the second year as well, in this deeply personal recognition. Um, and so I've seen people come in with huge, impossible, inescapable experiences that are very real. And instead of kind of washing them away with some kind of platitude or um, kind of
Protocol.
disappearing, yeah, protocol or a kind of disappearing more and more into something that's not me. There seems to be this very strange and sometimes very slow and sometimes very fast. It's all different kinds of processes unfolding, an unfolding or a kind of revealing of what was hidden. And sometimes the intelligence is to stay hidden. Sometimes the intelligence is I need to become more of me and fill more of my space. Sometimes the intelligence is, oh my gosh, I've been exhausted for 1,000 years. I need this kind of rest. And then sometimes it's, I need to run forever. So there's all these really interesting, to me, it feels like the vital force or the you could say it's partly the soma, you could say it's um something in the human being comes forth and says, oh, there may be room for me now, let me try this on and express something a little more alive. And that to me is the healing of a planet that's been suppressed for generations.
You've been mentioning a first year and a second year. Can you characterize the difference between the two? Does everybody take 2 years?
Yeah, it's totally different for each person. And some people think of it that way with this kind of logical progression. I've got to achieve the first year and the second year. We have many students who have stayed with the first year. Many people retake either first or second year or both because it's meant to be a very kind of gentle but also deep kind of dip into an experience and then dipping out of the experience on purpose. And for many people, they realize, oh, I really need to come back to this again and again. And so we make that easy for people if they want to do that. Some people find one time through is all they needed, and that was really the right thing for them. And then some people really love the second year working with the depths of thresholds around birth and death can feel really nourishing to some people and be really relevant to the work that they're called to. And then for others, it's a right relationship sort of thing to say, maybe not for me. The second year can wait, and maybe I'll do it someday, or maybe I won't." And it's not more advanced. I think what's more advanced is to really listen to who you are and what feels right to you.
So great. Yeah. I just heard you say the words right relationship. Do you want to characterize the adjunct classes in a few sentences?
Sure. So we have several really great adjunct classes, two of which are ones that I teach. I don't know if we want to mention that there is also a really brilliant class about developmental reflexes and a somatic approach. Um, very amazing work that Kimberly Clark offers as an adjunct in our school. So highly recommending that. And we also have Alchemical Alignment 101, which is being taught by Selena Cole right now, and sometimes may have other teachers depending on how it rotates. And I teach Magic of the Tides class, which is mostly intended as a deep dive for alchemical alignment students, but also includes people who may not have an alchemical alignment background into what we mean when we speak about tides. There's a whole lineage, many lineages. It's a syncretic tradition in the background of that word. And we could say maybe many traditions of understanding and reading or feeling or sensing tides in bodies, in the world, in nature around us, in processes. And so we go through a series of 7 classes of exploring first with ourselves, what are the tides in the world and how could we know them better? And then how is it relevant to any practice that's facilitating or healing or working with people or processes? Um, and and then a little bit of work more facilitating or holding space for someone who is going into a more tidal experience. So how could we offer that space to others? So that's Magic of the Tides. And then Right Relationship is the other class that I offer. And that's more about the complexity of relational fields and how they could actually be both complex and simple at the same time. How do we, without flattening, bring more coherence to group processes or interpersonal processes? Could be anything from 2 people to hundreds of people, or even global kind of world processes. And it's just one perspective of many, how I've learned to um, be available to something that's much larger than me in a human context.
Really appreciating that you're teaching both of those. Yeah. So, Joseph, I'm wondering, how would you describe what in your background made you a perfect candidate for teaching not just the adjunct classes, but also the first year and then the second year, obviously? But yeah, tell me about you being a match for this.
Hmm. Well, it kind of both surprised me and also, of course, seemed inevitable. It was as if the things that were being taught in the school were the culmination of many streams that I've been in for my life since childhood, being raised by basically a bunch of vitalist kind of mystics in their all in their own different ways. My parents and my grandparents are all mostly in those streams and definitely have been influenced by Canadian and immigrant Armenian and different European cultural traditions. But also there's this kind of radical edge in my family that has kind of stayed with me as much as I've tried to get out of it and be my own person. There are parts of me that are definitely deeply rooted in that tradition of vitalism and natural, understanding nature as an intelligent process. And so that stayed with me my whole life. I think I spent a lot of time in wilderness immersion and seeking to transform human relationships with nature through my own relationship, through community relationships, through working with queer and indigenous communities in rural places, and specifically that we're seeking to return into right relationship with I guess what people would call wild, but would have been more of a indigenously understood just belonging with nature and not necessarily a dichotomy between wild and what's not wild. So this kind of rewilding is sort of or returning to the wild feels to me a little bit incomplete because we're always here and we're always in relationship, and um, the boundaries that have been created to me feel between the wild and humans feel a little bit arbitrary or post-traumatic. And so I've over time more and more been drawn through working with these communities to understand what is the origin of patterns that are in the way of us being more here and belonging here and understanding here as more than just whatever, but something that actually has history and story, and that we're being touched by ancestral beings every time we walk by trees. You know, we're breathing with ancestral beings. And so that kind of intelligence being, I like the word immanence, being immanent in the natural world, being something that um, flourishes through the in between, that which is in between is always kind of emerging and showing itself, revealing itself. Um, that was always what guided me. And it led me deeper and deeper into biodynamics and body work. And I just kept being curious about, well, how does that reveal in my body? And how does it reveal in the people around me? And what does it actually mean in a practical way? Like, what would that mean if we were to actually listen to that more or make more space for that? So there are many traditions in the world that have found this in their own ways, or that belong to this, have always been with this in their own different ways. And so to me, I'm curious now for those who don't necessarily live in a rooted culture that has its own way of perpetuating or maintaining or um, tending to those relationships. Uh, how could a world that's kind of fractured into many individual experiences, um, how could that still have space for the intelligence, the transpersonal intelligence that's moving through everything?
A possibility that with people growing up and trained with AI,
Right.
in sync with AI, not maybe even distinguishing between what's in a device and what's outside in nature.
Mhm.
It seems to me that it might be possible that this type of work is more important than ever to share, to spread the word about.
Yeah, for me, what makes me feel human or what feels human to me is something like being in relationship with something that I'm not, that's not me. That's something that feels alive in a way that I'm not in charge of or in control of. And that being in that kind of dance of relationship with something that has its own life, that has its own will, that has its own intelligence is deeply important in the developmental processes of being a human. And then I think who knows where AI is going or what exactly is going to happen with all of that. But regardless, I think that being in an echo chamber, regardless of whether it's a technological echo chamber or a new age echo chamber or hermitage out in nature where I'm just lost in my own thoughts, what would it be like to actually um, turn toward something that's been here longer than me, that feels um, like it shows me something that I didn't see before. And those uh, that ability to be available to something like that for me feels, and I think in alchemical alignment, it really it really actually starts with having a self. So it's interesting how the kind of echo chamber of being lost in my own thoughts isn't necessarily to me a hallmark of having a self. Um, yes, there's a self in there somewhere, but the echo chamber of my mind would be potentially looping in history or experiences that are not um, present time experiences.
Right. Biodynamic, meaning that life is moving and current time relationship, current time breathing, current time interactions.
Mhm.
That's really where life is happening. Yeah.
That's where life is happening. And that's where we have power to change reality or to live. That's maybe it's not about power to change. It's just that then we are participating.
Yeah. So can you tell me something about the trajectory of the first year? It's
Yeah.
in online modules and in-person levels. They're both the same thing, just called two different things because one's online and one's in person.
Yeah. So the first year, both online and in person, really does begin with having a self and mattering, which could take a whole lifetime. So that's why we say there's no rush, we're just trying things on. It could take maybe many lifetimes for some people, and there's nothing really wrong because there's really no rush. It's all part of what we've come here to do, to incarnate and to be in the experience as it is. And so as it is oftentimes a big part of what we start with is how do we slow down enough? And maybe sometimes we need to speed up first, but orienting to what is actually happening here. Oftentimes, post-traumatically, a body is carrying so much story and so much experience that it has very legitimate need um, that there's no way to really see what's really happening here, or what's happening here is woven with what was true, or maybe things that are happening but not here and now. So those kinds of differentiations is a lot of what we start with, and understanding principles and skills and how do we create conditions for the innate healing capacity of any organism, but specifically adult human organisms, to express themselves, to come to the forefront. And then in time, little by little, we deepen into the layers of, well, we could start from more of a peripheral, very spacious orientation. What would that be like? What shows up when we stay really wide and allow lots of space? And then what happens when we come in a little bit closer? Sometimes the answer is no, stay away. And then we respect that. And then sometimes the answer is, oh, thank you so much. I needed someone to put their hand right there, or I needed someone to see this. Sometimes it's not about, so we work with touch skills, we work with attention skills, we work with listening skills, we work with relational skills, we work with just being in the presence of, which I'm always astounded by how so much of what's needed is just to notice and be in the presence or to be in presence with something that has been driven into obscurity or has kind of gotten lost over time. So what tends to happen is, to me, it feels like a toroidal, kind of from the inside as we work from the periphery in, there's this kind of center to the outside unfolding of a person that happens in these small doable steps. It's really not about overwhelm or about rushing forth into a mold of what I should be. It's actually the opposite of that. Like, what was I, or have I been, or what am I now? What has actually been a thread through this whole story that has carried me? And I think a lot of practitioners find themselves a little bit like maybe renewed, I would say, or restored in their original sense of, oh, right, this is what I've been here doing, and this is what I've been called to, and this is why. And sometimes the recognition of, oh, I need more art in my practice, or I have always been a dancer and I'm ready to like bring dance into this, or that intellect that I've always second guessed is actually so powerful and understands the intricacies of what's happening with my clients. So there's so much variety of what blossoms in those 7 modules or 4 levels. Um, and then I think for me, there's also this ground that's what's beyond me, what I don't need to carry, that clarification throughout the whole experience. This is not me. That's not my responsibility. I'm sitting with someone who's going through great difficulty or is shooting arrows at me and wants me to engage in a battle with them or something like that. And how do I do that without losing my sense of self when there's so much intensity in the world or in the space? And also, there is maybe some part of me that's available for something, for some small piece, and how powerful the smallest little pieces of work can be in transforming a reality when the reality is telling us more, 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 do more, fix more, make more happen. We have to find a solution. Um, it's a really radical thing to slow down and get really present and notice, oh, even just 5 minutes or even just 1 minute of this practice could alter everything around me.
So in alchemical alignment, we start with super short exchanges. Some people coming from bodywork traditions where they're used to hour-long exchanges are shocked by the power and depth of what can happen in a 10-minute, 15-minute, 20-minute exchange in the program. It's because using the skills that are taught in tiny doable bits as those layers and layers of skills are taught and applied for even 1 minute, something catalytic can happen with somaticized dysregulation, where the body is holding an imprint of it will always be this way.
Mhm.
That begins to slowly shift and change.
Yeah. And it can be a great gift to people who have been carrying great burdens to realize, oh, I don't have to do this alone. That's maybe one thing. And then the other thing being, it could be done in tiny, small, little doable pieces. And that actually seems to work better as far as we've found in this field.
Yeah.
And I'm noticing that everywhere in the world, not just in somatic body work.
Yeah. Thank you so much. So I really appreciate you speaking with me today. Are there any
Mhm.
closing thoughts that you might share with someone who is taking a look at the program and wondering, hey, I've been in practice for 2 years or 30 years. Do you have something for beginners and adepts as well in
Yeah.
the program?
So we say that, at least we used to say, and I think we still would agree, in general, that this is an advanced training and that that's the intention, is that it's for people who are ready to deepen. the work that they've already been kind of called to or doing. That being said, that can show up in many different walks or stages of life. We've had people who are educators who have come. We've had people who are doctors who have been in practice for many years. We have people who have been therapists for many years. We have body workers for many years. And we also have people who just got out of massage school. We have people who are considering, like, what if somatic body work is for me? And I would say it's not necessarily ideal for someone who's totally new to somatic work. And at the same time, sometimes it is the thing that someone's called for. And so instead of having rules about who's allowed to come to this program, we've decided over time, I think really Bridget's wisdom over time was to recognize any rule that we have seems to get blown up just because the world has tremendous variety. So to me, it's really the beginning of joining a class of alchemical alignment would just be sitting with yourself and feeling, does this feel right to me? Is there something that kind of, I think everybody who's called to it does feel that kind of glimmer or uh, a rightness or kind of a sense of grounding or alignment with this work that we're doing. Because it's beyond necessarily, what we could summarize in a conversation like this. It's really, um, I would say, an emergent field that has many expressions. So I think if you're feeling that sense of, oh, this does feel right to me, but I doubt myself, or I'm not really sure if I would belong there, or I don't know, I would say I felt that too. Um, it was kind of a surprise to me. I thought, oh, I've already had so many trainings and I already know trauma work and I don't really need this and I'm good. But it's not really so much. I mean, the theory is profound and definitely really helpful. But I think for me, it's more about the experience of sitting in um, presence with others who are asking similar but totally different questions. That's an interesting paradox. That there's wide variety, but there's also um, a certain kind of humanness that is reflected in the space that for me, and I think for many, is kind of a relief of, oh, I don't have to be the only one who's asking these kinds of questions. Like, how can I exist in the reality that I've landed in?
Yeah. And that possibility that each person who's signing up has a double bind of some kind that says, I must do something, but I can't do something. I must find this new training program. I just simply can't make my way
Yeah.
there. I don't see my way between here and there. Or I must change something. I can't. And these opposing energies can keep us stuck forever. And so we encourage you to come and try a small, doable bit, which could be coming to one of our offerings, reading the book, come to a meditation just one time for an hour and a half. That would be, you'd be so welcome. And check out the rest of the pages of the website. Maybe come to a constellation or to,
Mhm.
yeah, our online or in person classes. All right. Thanks, Joseph. And thank you to the listener for listening to this today.